My name is Brenda Foster, and I've spent my life in operating rooms, keeping people alive. You'd think I'd be used to pressure by now. But nothing prepares you for the pain that comes when your sister tries to humiliate you in front of everyone at her engagement. The engagement party was expensive. Crystal glasses chimed beneath golden chandeliers, and soft music drifted from a string quartet in the corner. Her fiancé's family was everywhere. Perfect smiles, perfect charm, perfect deception. And then there was me, the older sister no one bothered to introduce, the one with the scar across my face that my sister always told me to cover with makeup because, according to her, it made me look scary. I arrived on time, wearing a navy blue dress, simple, confident, the kind of calm that never begs to be noticed. As I crossed the room toward the champagne table, Vanessa looked straight at me, tilted her head just so, and smiled. Not the kind of smile that welcomes. The kind that makes you feel like a walking disgrace. She leaned toward her friends and whispered behind her hand. They turned, glanced at me, and laughed. I didn't flinch. I simply took my seat. Later, when her fiancé asked what I did for a living, I said one word and the room froze. My sister finally realized who I was. Growing up with Vanessa taught me early that for some parents, the love they have for their kids has conditions. Specific ones. I was born with a scar. A long, jagged line down my left cheek, the result of a complication at birth. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. My mother said it was a pity. My mother complained that the scar marred my beauty, and I never heard the last of it. If only she'd been born like Vanessa, she'd say, usually when she thought I wasn't listening. But I always was. Children learn to hear the things not meant for them. Vanessa came 3 years later, smooth-skinned and cherubic. The baby everyone wanted to hold, to photograph, to show off. I became the child they kept in the background, the one cropped out of family portraits or positioned at odd angles to hide the left side of my face. At dinner tables, Vanessa would make jokes. Brenda's face looks like a road map, she'd laugh, tracing invisible lines in the air. Our parents would chuckle, never correcting her. Oh, Vanessa, my mother would say fondly. You're terrible. By high school, the pattern was set. Vanessa was the social one, the pretty one, the one with potential. I was serious, intense, too focused on books, and not enough on being likable. You'd be prettier if you smiled more, my mother told me once, right before Vanessa's sweet 16. Try to look approachable tonight. Just because you have that scar doesn't mean you have to act like it. I wore turtlenecks and kept my hair long enough to hide behind. I sat at the edges of rooms and learned how to be small. Not invisible, not quite. Just unimportant enough not to be a problem. But I was watching. Always watching. And what I saw was this. Beauty without substance is just decoration. It doesn't last. It doesn't build anything. One day, I asked my mother how I got the scar. Reluctantly, she told me it was the result of a complication at birth that required surgery, that I owed my life to the doctor who saved me. I could hear the disdain in her voice as she spoke, but all I felt was gratitude toward the doctor. In that quiet moment, I made a decision. I would become a doctor myself. When it came time for college, I applied to Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and earned a full scholarship to study neurosurgery, determined to follow in the footsteps of the doctor who saved me. The scholarship letter came on a Tuesday. One Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Full ride. One of 12 students accepted that year out of thousands of applicants. I brought it to the dinner table with hands that shook slightly. For once, I wanted them to see me. Really see me. I got into medical school, I said. Johns Hopkins. Full scholarship. My mother glanced up from her salad. That's nice, dear. Just don't get your hopes too high. Medical school is very competitive. My father nodded, without looking up. Long road ahead. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Med school? Sounds lonely. Have fun with that. I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't bring it up again. 3 weeks later, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and moved across the state. I didn't cry at the airport. I didn't look back through the rear window of the taxi. I just left. And for the first time in my life, I felt something close to freedom. Medical school was brutal. 18-hour days. Anatomy labs that smelled like formaldehyde and exhaustion. Exams that demanded perfection when your eyes burned from lack of sleep and your hands trembled from too much caffeine and not enough food. I thrived. While Vanessa posted pictures from beach vacations and brunch dates, I was elbow-deep in cadavers, memorizing neural pathways, learning to read MRI scans like other people read novels. While she collected compliments, I collected skills. Residency was harder. Neurosurgery is unforgiving. One wrong move, 1 millimeter off target, and you've destroyed someone's ability to walk, to speak, to remember their children's names. The pressure never stops. It follows you into your sleep, into your dreams. I learned to carry it. I learned to be steady when everything around me was chaos. And then I started to win. I developed a technique to reduce swelling during delicate operations on the brain. I also assisted on a complex surgery to remove a tumor, helping patients recover safely. My techniques became standard protocol in our department. I operated on cases other surgeons called impossible. At 34, I was named Chief of Neurosurgery. That same year, a newborn in Dallas was rushed into emergency surgery after being diagnosed with a rare brain condition. The case made national headlines. Everyone called her the Dallas baby. I was called in at 3 a.m. The operation lasted 11 hours. Against every prediction, the baby survived. The press called it a miracle. The medical community called it precision. I called it Tuesday. My name started appearing in places that mattered. Medical conferences. Research papers. News articles about breakthrough procedures. My family never mentioned it. Not once. I didn't mind. My life was full and meaningful in ways they'd never understand. I wasn't looking to reconnect, not after all these years. Until one afternoon, a message came from Vanessa. It was an invitation. It arrived on a Wednesday. Cream-colored envelope, expensive paper, Vanessa's name printed in gold beside a name I didn't recognize. Kyle Wallace. Inside was a card announcing their engagement party. No personal note. No, we'd love for you to be there. Just the formal invitation and a date. Then came the text. Hi, Bren. Don't feel pressure to come. Kyle's family is kind of upper class. Try to use makeup to hide the scar if you decide to show up. V. I read it 3 times. Each time it stung a little less. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd stopped expecting better. She was my sister, and I wanted to at least show up for her on her special day. I booked my flight that night. I landed in Dallas, Texas, around 6 p.m. and drove a rental car straight to the hotel where the engagement was being held. The venue was a hilltop estate with manicured hedges and a valet line that stretched down the driveway. White tents glowed against the evening sky. Everywhere you looked, there was money, taste, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself. I arrived precisely on time. I've never been late. Not to surgery, not to rounds, not to moments that matter. The navy blue dress I chose was simple but commanding, the kind that spoke without trying too hard. I wasn't there to compete with Vanessa's spotlight. I was there to wish her well. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Guests circulated with champagne and canapes, their laughter practiced and easy. Vanessa held court near the center of the room, her sequined gown catching every ray of light. She looked happy. She looked adored. Our parents stood nearby, my mother in a dress too young for her age, my father with that same passive expression he'd worn through most of our childhood. Present but not participating. My mother's eyes found me across the room. She paused, something flickering across her face, confusion, maybe recognition. Then she turned back to her conversation without a word. Not even a wave. I wasn't surprised. Disappointment requires expectation, and I'd stopped expecting years ago. I found a seat at a table partially hidden by the floral arrangements. From there, I could observe without being observed. Or so I thought. Dinner was served on china that probably cost more than my first car. The food was beautiful, each plate arranged like art. I picked at smoked salmon and roasted vegetables, watching the room perform its carefully rehearsed social dance. Then Vanessa found me. Well, look who made it, she said, air kissing near my cheek without actually making contact. I wasn't sure you'd come. This isn't really your scene, is it? I had the time, I replied evenly. She glanced at my dress, her smile tightening slightly. Navy blue? Bold choice for an engagement party. I didn't explain that navy blue was what I wore when I wanted to be taken seriously. That in my world, appearance was secondary to confidence. That I'd earned the right to wear whatever I chose. Someone needed to ground the palate, I said instead. She blinked, unsure if I was joking. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice. Just try not to be too, serious. Kyle's family asks a lot of questions, and they're very big on first impressions. Then maybe they'll get honest answers, I replied. She laughed, loud and theatrical, like I'd made a joke. Classic Brenda. Always so intense. She flitted off before I could respond, already giggling with someone in heels too high to be practical. I exhaled slowly and sipped my champagne. There it was again. That word. Intense. A lifetime of being told I was too much when all I ever tried to be was enough. Kyle Wallace approached during the main course. He was tall, polished, the kind of man who'd been raised with every advantage and wore it comfortably. He extended his hand with a politician's smile. Brenda, right? Vanessa's sister? I nodded. That's me. She doesn't talk about you much, he said, sitting down across from me uninvited. I wasn't even sure you two were close. We're sisters, I said simply. He chuckled, uncertain how to read that. She mentioned you work in healthcare or nursing. Something ordinary. I tilted my head slightly. Well, if that's what she calls it. He didn't push further. Vanessa had clearly given him the version of me that fit her narrative. The boring older sister with the scar and the thankless job. An ordinary nurse. Maybe a medical assistant. Anything but the truth. Dinner gave way to speeches. Vanessa's friends stood one by one, delivering toasts full of inside jokes and exaggerated compliments. The kind of performance designed to make everyone feel included in something exclusive. Vanessa soaked in every word, her laughter floating through the room with the ease of someone who'd never doubted she was loved. I stayed in my corner, partly obscured by white orchids and the deliberate architecture of my own invisibility. No one asked who I was. Not Kyle's parents, not his siblings, not any of the guests who'd been introduced to half the room with elaborate stories about connections and childhood memories. At one point, I overheard someone ask Kyle if Vanessa had any family. She does, he said, sipping his drink. A sister. But they're not close. I didn't react. That had always been their story. I was the distant one. Cold. Serious. Too focused on work to maintain relationships. Never mind that Vanessa hadn't returned a phone call in 3 years. Never mind that I'd flown home when our mother had pneumonia and was asked to wait in the lobby so Vanessa could have privacy. Let them tell it however they liked. I'd lived long enough to know the difference between truth and narrative. Then Vanessa stood. She tapped her fork against her glass, and the room fell silent. Every eye turned toward her. The spotlight from the chandelier caught her sequins like a constellation. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, she said, beaming. Truly, I feel so blessed. The crowd smiled back, phones already raised to capture the moment. I know this might surprise some of you, she continued with a practiced giggle, but I wasn't always this put together. Soft laughter rippled through the room. Kyle leaned back in his chair, proud. Growing up, I was the fun one. My sister Brenda was the opposite. She was very serious, very by the book. Vanessa's smile widened. She once refused to speak to me for a week because I borrowed her biology notes without asking. I was 15. Laughter erupted. I remained perfectly still. She's always been that way, Vanessa went on, waving her hand dismissively. Intense. Judgmental. Honestly, I'm just grateful she showed up tonight. She's not big on family gatherings. Or smiling. She looked directly at me, held the gaze just long enough to register, then winked. Kyle nudged her playfully. Be nice, he said with a grin. Then he turned toward me, still smiling and intending to embarrass me. But really, we're lucky you made time. Vanessa said you work in, what was it? Hospital admin? I set my fork down gently beside my untouched entree. That's not correct, I said quietly. The laughter began to fade. I'm sorry, I continued, meeting Kyle's eyes. Where did you hear that? He blinked. Vanessa said something about healthcare administration. Office work. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence build, let it fill the spaces where their assumptions had been. No, I said finally. That's not correct. Vanessa laughed nervously. Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. She's wrong, I said, still looking at Kyle. I don't work in administration. Another pause. Longer this time. The room had gone completely still. I'm a neurosurgeon. I paused. I'm the Chief of Neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. The silence was immediate and absolute, like the room had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. From a table near the back, someone gasped. Wait, Dr. Foster? Heads turned. A woman in emerald green stood up, her hand covering her mouth. Dr. Brenda Foster from Johns Hopkins? I nodded once. You operated on the Dallas baby, she whispered. The newborn. It was all over the news. More murmurs. More phones emerging from pockets and purses. Google searches lighting up beneath the table linens. The woman in green was crying now, walking toward me. Thank you, she said, her voice breaking. Thank you for saving her life. I followed that story. What you did was incredible. Others began to murmur in recognition. Someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the entire room rose in applause, the sound building like a wave. I raised my hand slightly in acknowledgement. Thank you. I'm honored. Kyle stared at me like I was a painting he'd been looking at wrong. Like he'd suddenly realized there was a whole landscape behind what he'd assumed was just a frame. You're a neurosurgeon? He asked. But this time there was no grin. No charm. Just confusion. Chief of Neurosurgery. Johns Hopkins. The woman in green answered him on my behalf. She also saved a teenage girl's life 5 months ago. Another voice called out. Kyle's hand dropped from Vanessa's back. Vanessa's face had gone pale. The spotlight that had been hers moments ago now felt like an interrogation lamp. I didn't know you were still doing that, she muttered. I thought you'd moved on. I stood then. Not abruptly. Slowly. With purpose. I folded my napkin and placed it gently beside my plate. Every movement carried weight now. Not because I forced it, but because the weight had always been there. They just never bothered to see it. I met Kyle's eyes one last time. When people don't ask questions, I said softly, they shouldn't be surprised by the answers. Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked at our parents, who sat frozen, their faces pale. My mother's lips were slightly parted. My father looked like he'd aged a decade in 30 seconds. I walked past them all. Past the shocked whispers and the sideways glances and the crumbling facades. No drama. No theatrics. Just quiet gravity. The verdict had already been delivered. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand attention. It just exists, steady and real. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Brenda. Wait. Vanessa's voice. Smaller now. Uncertain. I turned. She stood there in her sequin dress, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. For the first time all night, she looked young. Vulnerable. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I waited. I'm sorry, she continued. For all of it. For tonight. For growing up. For never asking who you really were. I studied her face. There were no cameras now. No audience. Just my sister, finally seeing me. I hope you'll be very happy, I said. And I meant it. She nodded, tears spilling over. I wish I'd known you. You could have, I replied gently. You just had to ask. I turned and walked to my car. As I drove away, passing headlights illuminated my face through the window. The scar on my left cheek caught the light. It didn't look like shame anymore. It looked like survival. They'd spent years pretending not to see me. But I was never invisible. They just never looked. I didn't need their love to matter. I only needed to become the woman they could never diminish again. And now, driving away from that hilltop venue with all its glittering lights and empty laughter, I realized something else. I didn't need their apology either. I didn't need them to understand what I'd built or to be proud of who I'd become. What I'd earned on my own. Every surgery, every life saved, every impossible case that became possible because I refused to give up. That was mine. Wholly and completely mine.
And it was enough.
And to you listening, I know what it's like to be made to feel less than because of something you can't control, a scar, a difference, a moment that marks you. Don't let anyone make you ashamed of who you are. Use it. Let it drive you, fuel your determination, and shape the life you want to build. Every challenge, every look of doubt or dismissal can become a stepping stone to something greater. One day, the same people who doubted you will see the life you've created, not because they made you, but because you refuse to let their judgments define you. Be proud of who you are and build a life that even your younger self would admire. If this story touched you, then hit the subscribe button, because every day I tell gripping tales of revenge and redemption that you don't want to miss.